Welcome to the Business Herald Podcast. The Business Herald is a weekly roundup of all of the top UK business news stories by email, social media, and this podcast. The podcast will feature some of the week's main stories, and we'll be joined by various business people on each episode to discuss the week's news and how it might impact a smaller business like yours. And hopefully we'll have some fun on a Friday too. I'm your host, Stephen Mather. I'm a lawyer for SMEs, and I help business owners sleep better at night by sorting their legal problems out. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Business Herald. Welcome along to episode 29 of the Business Herald. This week, I'm joined by two Johns. Jonathan Lee is a solicitor and founder of the Jonathan Lee Network, an SRA-regulated law firm made up of both employed and self-employed lawyers, which he set up in 2013. He previously trained in the city, and the firm has more than doubled its turnover over the course of 2020 and continues to grow apace in 2021. John Woodcock has been both businessman and employee and now helps voluntary organisations to progress, adapt and evolve through proactive and progressive training, coaching and development. He has over 20 years experience in working for various companies from international to small companies. So welcome along, both of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
That's okay. So there's been a couple of interesting stories this week. And the first one, which caught my eye, was that Spain are looking to introduce a 4-day working week. While the details have yet to be thrashed out, it would seem that the government is going to support the costs of the trial in the first year. They will allow an employee to be paid for 5 days, but only would do 4 days work. Interesting, I don't know if you guys know this, the 5-day working week was actually invented by the Ford Motor Company. Henry Ford thought that none of his workers would aspire to buy one of his cars if all they did was work. So in giving them one extra day off, it allowed them to use their money, spend it, and be a consumer. So for me, I say I work 4 days a week, but on my 5th day, the Friday, this is when I do a podcast. But it allows that time, that extra day, to have a bit of life admin, to rest, to enjoy life, to look after yourself. So what do you guys think? John, I'll come to you to start with. Do you think a 4-day working week would work?
I think it's been originally trialled in Sweden a few years ago. I might have passed comment on it about a few years ago when it was done then. For me personally, I think it's positive. Now there are going to be pros and cons to the 4-day working week, because obviously there'll be those that will abuse it, and there'll be those that actually use it wisely. But I'm one of those people where, if you have less time to do something, you do tend to get it done within that period of time anyway. So a 4-day working week, I still think that people will, if do not do more than they would do normally anyway.
Yeah. So you have 4 days, but you actually do 5 days worth of work in those 4 days. And of course, the converse is, like you say, there'll always be people that take the mick. And so they'll do 4 days and won't do anything more than that. And they'll do, their number of hours. 4 days in Spain is 32 hours of working, by the way. So it kind of, that's where they were looking at 4 days, 32 hours. Jonathan, as an employer, what would you say? Would you welcome a 4-day working week if it meant that your staff were more motivated, encouraged, and had better mental health? Or would you like the productivity?
Yeah, I think I probably have a more cynical mindset, but at the same time, I'm open to the idea, and I think all of these things are great if it's voluntary and if that's sort of an arrangement and organisations, employers and employees and wider stakeholders comes to an agreement together. But in this context, it's a government from above trying to impose something on people whether they want it or not. So there's an element of compulsion. But the idea generally, I think like Steve, when I was like you a few years back, when it was just me on my own and I was self-employed solicitor, I was thinking, right, great, I'm going to be, not work as much, or I'm going to, try and be a bit more disciplined, like maybe you're doing now, and have 1 day off a week to do other things. But that never managed to materialize or make that happen, despite sort of some efforts. And I did do some traveling and take some time off and all the rest of it while keeping my business going. But then that did have a sort of negative impact. And the more time I was away from desk, computer, emails, client work, then it took a while to get things going again. So Yeah, I mean, if people, I mean, I think the way we sort of run our business, I think there are certain, we have both employees and self-employed consultants, so there's that element of flexibility anyway. But then whether you're employed and self-employed, we try and structure things, so that there's an element of flexibility for people generally. And if things are agreed in contract at the outset, for example, if somebody wants to join us as an employee, but they also have commitments at home, and therefore they only want to work a certain number of hours a week and to do some of those hours from home, then that's all great if it's all upfront and agreed. But then it creates difficulties if one side thinks they can do something and the other side isn't necessarily happy with that, or it hasn't been negotiated and agreed, as it were. But yeah, no, interesting. It comes from Spain. I mean, my brother lives in Madrid, and they have a great culture, I think, over there to taking time off. And there's all sorts of public holidays that my brother and his family benefit from. And there's a culture also, which I think less so like the 4-day working week. I think what they do in Spain is it's pretty much, it's not from government, it's not imposed, as it were, but it's a cultural thing that pretty much everyone takes the whole of August off. So Madrid in August is a ghost town. No one's there. Everyone's off by the seaside or wherever it might be. So I always think in the UK and elsewhere, we should try and do things like that, whereas, people don't expect people to be working in August, for example, and people have some genuine, decent chunk of time off.
Of course, in Spain, historically, I don't know if this still is the case, but they have the long lunch, don't they? They have the break, when it gets a little bit too hot, and they have a break, and then they typically work later, into the evening. So they'll, just a normal typical employee would probably still be working at 7 o'clock at night rather than finishing at 5 o'clock because they have 2 hours off at lunch. So maybe that makes a difference. Lunch. Yeah, same here. I feel like I've got Spanish blood in me, obviously. There was a report as well, which I think is probably connected, and I'm going to connect it anyway. So there's a report out this week, 5,000 businesses, 29% of employees apparently are depressed. And they've said that 90% of businesses have introduced some sort of well-being programs to help employees. Whether or not they're genuine, whether or not they're tick box, I don't know. I make no comment on it at this point. But when we have a situation like that, and we have the mental health epidemic that we have in this country, which I think is it is an epidemic and is something that's really bad and really quite serious. I can see a situation or a time where actually we start to prioritize people's mental health, and therefore having something like a 4-day working week will be introduced, because it allows that those people that need a bit of time to have some time off, and we all probably know what it's like being busy. You just working. You never get the time to yourself. You never get to the time to do, the things that you want to do. You have a day off. I remember, as an employed solicitor, you kind of have a day off and you end up doing life admin, those things that you need to do that you never really got around to doing. And I just wonder, John, like from it, that's got to help, hasn't it? Kind of having a situation where we're actually caring about people's mental health, that's got to help and make people improve their overall productivity and performance, hasn't it?
I think so. I mean, I'm a big advocate for mental health and well-being anyway. And I think that, ultimately you've got to, it's like we always say you got to look after number one, because if you're not working right yourself, mentally and physically, then you're not going to be any good to yourself and those that rely upon you. So the same goes with those that are at work. You can't have an expectation on those individuals that are suffering from whatever it may well be. And I suppose maybe having worked from home for the last 12 months, or not worked and been furloughed, or just had enough of going literally straight onto the same hamster's wheel day after day after day for that period of time, it is going to get to those individuals. So I do think that something will start to filter through, I'd be surprised if it doesn't, because I see it and hear it now, where mental health and well-being is being spoken about by HR or HR individuals quite a lot. This is just my humble opinion on what I see and what I hear, and I do think that looking after your employees' mental health and well-being has got to be absolutely paramount if you want to get the best out of them. Yes, you're paying them. Don't get me wrong. You're giving them a wage, so you have an expectation for something to come back from that. But also look after them as well.
Yeah.
If you look after them and you pay them well, guess what? They'll do an awful lot of work for you.
And times have changed from the Henry Ford days, where we all worked in a factory. And he saw, visionary saw that giving them some extra time to spend the money that they were earning would be a good thing for his organization and other ones, because it meant people became consumers and would spend more. And perhaps it takes it occasionally takes visionaries like that to go, do you know what? Yeah, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to change things, so that the whole of the population just is a little bit better. Jonathan, have you introduced any kind of wellness, in inverted commas, wellness things for your people?
Not officially as such, but we'll sort of become more corporate in that respect, and we're sort of looking to do more things like that. But I think generally we or anyone else sort of need to create a sort of a positive environment, and you want work to be something that people enjoy. It should, they should enjoy it anyway, and it should be interesting, gives people purpose, all the rest of it. But if you don't like the environment you're in or the place that you work, then it can make your life miserable. And when I can remember a couple of times in the past at places I've worked at, which really didn't like being there at all, and it was just dreading going to work every day. Not because the work itself was necessarily, or clients were necessarily problematic. It's more just the politics and the bureaucracy and the way people were treated and all the rest of it. So I can remember one example as well, when I did 6 months in the Dubai office of Clyde & Co, and at the time there they still had the 6-day working week, which they've now dropped to 5 days. But life was fantastic over there. It was all a new experience, all very enjoyable, really positive buzz in the office, all sorts of great, interesting people I was working with, and I was making the most of life outside the office, even though it was 1 day off a week. So I was kind of like going out till 3 in the morning and then getting into work at 8 in the morning, which was their official start date, sort of with alcohol in my breath, and still trying to, I guess, because I enjoyed it and I was a bit younger then, that was a really good sort of 6 months period. But, I think well, I mean, we did like a corporate away day. That was great. So it's good to have things, and we've done like even last year when it was problematic, we did a summer party and things like that. So for me myself anyway, and I also remember where working at places in the past, having things like that are important. There's things that I remember really well as really positive things at places I worked at before. So we're sort of keen to try and continue with things like that, and any other sort of things that are beneficial to help people have a good time generally, really.
What do you do on a personal level, Jonathan? Obviously, like managing a firm and managing clients and all of that, it's it takes its tolls just normally. So what do you do to relax, rest, get some me time?
Myself, so I think I've learned over time, I think you always need I'm quite happy doing nothing, and enjoying time at the weekend doing personal admin and catching up on stuff, and going to the tip and all the rest, all the boring stuff that people have to do. But at the same time, I think you need sort of to be a bit disciplined yourself with how you organize your time outside of work. So always try and ensure that there are things, interesting trips and things in the calendar planned ahead. So then you've always got those things to look forward to and interesting experiences to do. And I think some people don't always do that, and I think that can make you somewhat, not necessarily depressed, but it's not not if you're not sort of constantly doing interesting things in your time off, then that can have a negative impact on mental health. So Not that I can. I think generally with people I know and whether people I work with or friends outside, always sort of encouraging people to do different things, interesting things, when they can in the time off.
Joan, what's your what do you do, and what's your top tip for smaller business owners about getting some time off, mentally time off?
It's a tough one, having been a business owner myself previously, because you're constantly thinking about work, especially as a small business owner. You're constantly thinking about what's happening the next day, even if it's a Saturday or a Sunday, and mapping out and planning out a few things. But genuinely, having had a sort of like what I call a mind wobble, a few years ago, it's not something that I wish upon my worst enemy, but you do need to take a little bit of downtime. Sometimes when you can't see the wood for the trees scenario, it's very hard, and that's where you need to have, I believe, a trusted sort of tribe, whether that's your family, that your wife or your partner, or you've got individuals that are close to you that can see that you're not firing on all cylinders, that you're not in a good place, is that they have the confidence to sort of have that conversation with you. I still have these conversations about because I speak out quite a lot about men's mental health, but I speak about mental health full stop, and irrespective of how much it is said and talked about and put out on sort of social media that it's okay not to be okay, and talking about men's mental health, it's the trust element with regards to, is there an element of trust? Can I have that conversation with my good friend about this, that, or the other? In my opinion, yes, you can. And I think for me, to switch off from what I've always tried to do, is sort of like, I'll go for a run, or I'll go out on the bike. I can't run at the minute because I've ripped.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did that work out for you, John? With your ripped knee ligaments?
It's my own fault, because obviously, sort of, I kind of sort of unfortunately had coronavirus in December, and then, like an idiot, 10 days later, went for a run. And wondered why, when I was about a kilometre into the run, I couldn't breathe. Then it dropped. Penny dropped. So I did myself a lot of harm, I think, personally. We resorted to going for long walks, and it was brilliant because me and the good wife, we had great conversations, talked lots and lots of stuff, put the world to rights. It was brilliant. And then I just thought, right, okay, we'll start I'm feeling a bit fitter now, get back into running. So 10 days into sort of running, and I've torn the ligaments in my right knee. Well, that was 2 weeks ago, and it's still incredibly painful. So
still bad.
I'll be back on my bike soon.
Get out there and get some fresh air.
Absolutely, yeah.
Moving on, so the government did something what I think is quite a strange about turn on electric vehicles this week. They suddenly announced the reduction of the EV car grant by £500, and they've limited it to vehicles less than £35,000, which excludes quite a lot of it excludes the Tesla range and a lot of the higher priced electric vehicles that are coming out from BMW, Mercedes, and Audi, and that kind of thing. The government said that the scheme wasn't there to intend the well-off to buy cars and get a bigger discount. But for me, the point that seems to be missed is that those customers were buying those cars because of the availability of a grant and because of the tax advantages, particularly putting it into through a company. And now that that's reduced or gone, I don't really see what the incentive is to kind of go green. And it seems to me like that's a bit of a bad idea from an environmental point of view. And you might not know the specifics of it, but do you not think, John, that we should be encouraging people to go green, and as a government should be putting money into people going green, whether that's electric vehicles or other ways?
Absolutely, 100%. If you take one of the things out of the pandemic, where we've all been, well, most of Leicestershire's, Leicester's been in lockdown for 12 months, so the carbon footprint has got to have reduced dramatically, and therefore logic would dictate that to help with that you kind of sort of look at having electric vehicles available and having that subsidy and that grant available. So, we can go out and purchase those vehicles rather than going to go and get ourselves a nice dirty diesel or a souped up petrol. There's nothing wrong with a souped up petrol. Don't get me wrong. I do like a car. But like right at the beginning of the pandemic, when I wasn't going to be working and I needed a car, we got rid of one of the cars. We've got one car now because I work from home.
Yeah.
That will probably change, maybe. I didn't say anything. But I find it very odd. But then there have been odd decisions made by our government for many a year.
And it's a nice, easy way for them to, raking a bit of extra cash. Tesla's the highest selling car at the minute, worldwide, but in the UK as well. It's the biggest, and it's number one car sales. And perhaps the government just thought, well, people are buying it, so we'll take away some of the tax advantage, tax grant, and raise some extra cash. Right? I think my point is, people are only buying it because of the tax advantages. And if you take that away, are they going to do that? Are they going to go and buy what they used to buy, BMW 5 Series, M5 or something like that? It's a gas guzzler, but it's a nice car, and they're happy to do that. Don't know. Jonathan, what? Oh, go on. Sorry, John.
No. I was going to say, I know this 35 grand limit thing is just mad. Because if you look at, a lot of the electric vehicles, they're above that, way above it.
Yeah.
And they tend to be the ones that are a little bit more sexy, which tends to be the ones that people go, I'll have that.
Yeah, exactly.
Who wants a Nissan Leaf? Other cars like that are out there as well.
Unless, of course, Nissan wants to sponsor this podcast, and then Nissan Leaf all the way, my friends.
I'll retract it. You can edit me out.
Yeah, Jonathan, what do you think? Do you think this is like a missed opportunity, or what for the government?
Yeah, I don't know what the stats are. Maybe you're right that people people will continue to buy these electric cars even though they're way more expensive without the grant and subsidy. But I remember when I was looking at buying a new car year or so, or maybe further back now, then I was sort of quite looking at some of the electric ones, and it's like, whoa, no way, they're like way more expensive. So I went for a souped up petrol car instead. But I don't know. Well, I guess now it's a bit different in that, the last year no one's been moving about much. We can't really travel, and I haven't used the car that much anyway. But the electric cars and all of that seem attractive, and there's been a lot of investment in the infrastructure, and even like the local pub, they've got the electric car charging points and all the rest of it. So maybe wait and see what happens. But I think people are interested. People want to buy these cars.
Yeah.
But because they're so much more expensive, then they get to the point where they start to look into it. And if they don't have that, grant subsidy available, then I think then people's interest drops.
They did something similar in Hong Kong when the Teslas first came out in Hong Kong. Luxury cars in Hong Kong, they have 100% tax, right? So you want to buy a car for £60,000 in Hong Kong dollars equivalent, it will cost you 120,000 because there's 100% tax rate on luxury cars. But there was a little bit of a loophole which was eventually closed, which was the electric vehicles didn't have. They had 0% tax, I think, so they didn't have the 100% uplift. So the Tesla X came out, which is £100,000 car basic price upwards. That came out, and this was probably 2-3 years ago, I think. You drive around, walk around in Hong Kong, and almost every other car was a Tesla. We got a taxi and an Uber, and we were picked up in a Tesla X, £100,000 car, because it was cheaper for them to have that as a luxury car than it was to buy like a BMW or an Audi or whatever, import that and pay the 100% tax. So the government quite quickly closed that loophole, and imagine, the sales of Teslas, evened off very quickly because people are only buying the cars where there's, an attractive tax advantage to doing it. John, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on something that Jonathan said with regards to their infrastructure. I mean, if you look at the amount of, I know Shell have gone in quite big on sort of, changing their forecourts, and I know that BP are following suit. And when we were allowed to go and actually drive a car, and you went up the motorway, there's a lot of charge points being actually input in motorway service stations. From what I can see with regards to what the government are doing with that is that this is our opinion on this, which is surely that's not going to make anyone go out and purchase a new electric vehicle if they're reducing the advantages of buying one. They're taking away that that sort of like X amount of percent off.
Yeah, or maybe the way in which the government are looking at it is seeing that actually a lot of the car and Volkswagen are saying that from certain date they're going to be making all electric cars. Jaguar Land Rover said that they're going to be making all electric cars. Ford are making more all electric cars, and they're all of them have, or most of them have committed to being all electric by a certain date. And maybe the government are going, well, you don't
need to do anything. Yeah,
we've stopped needing to offer a grant or a thingy because you're going to do it anyway.
There'll be no choice in the market soon, or
there's no choice in the market,
and it will be electric.
Yeah. We're looking, and for us on a normal normal year of driving, it'd save us a couple of £100 a month buying an electric vehicle, and so the figures start to stack up it themselves, and maybe the government doesn't need to help. I'm torn because I'm like, the government shouldn't interfere in anything, but at the same time, having some sort of support, some kind of encouragement for people to go green, it seems like it's a good thing. I don't know. Right. There's been a lot of news this week, a lot of stories here and in the US about consumer confidence and optimism. All because of the vaccine rollouts. We've had 25 million people apparently in the UK that has been vaccinated, and there seems to be a lot of consumer confidence. We're told that people have saved up somewhere around 150 billion, and there's going to be a windfall or a bit of a spending spree. That's been reduced down this week. Bank of England said that they think actually it's only going to be about 25% of what people have saved up is going to be spent, so about 50 billion onto the market. But what are your thoughts? Do you think that the vaccine rollout does give people that confidence, or do you think it's because actually we're moving past the whole thing now and everyone's bored of what's happened and they want to get out and spend? John, let's come with you first.
Probably both. Probably both. Is there an element of confidence with the vaccine? Some of it, I have overheard certain conversations where somebody's had the first jab and they're off to go and see all of their mates, and you're like, yeah, okay. Not quite. Once you've had the 2 jabs, fill your boots, but still be careful. I think it will give an element of confidence. It's almost like that placebo effect. It will give that element of confidence. But on top of that, I do genuinely believe that people are sick and tired of, staring at their own 4 walls, and there's only so much Netflix and sort of, prime TV that you can watch. So yeah, I do think that, and I agree. I've had several conversations with people with regards to, and I'll caveat this before I say it, is that I understand that there are, households and businesses that have not fared particularly well throughout the last 12 months, but there are households and businesses that have done quite well with regards to capital reserves that they are currently sitting on, and therefore logic dictates that that money will be spent, not necessarily wisely, but it will be spent and will therefore come back into the economy. So I think that we're in for the latter part of this year. I think there will be an element of uplift economically, and again, that should increase positivity.
Yeah. 12 to 14 months ago, anyone that said the whole idea behind this was, to do with making everybody have some sort of digital ID was termed and called a conspiracy theorist. But now the EU have announced that they're going to bring out a vaccine certificate program, and all the airlines have adopted a kind of a COVID passport app. Where you put in your details as to whether or not you've done it. And Jonathan, do you think that that people are now to the point where they've been restricted so much that they are just desperate to get out, that they'll have anything? They'll like, just let me sign up, whatever it is, let me sign up for it so I can go out.
Well, that does seem the case, and I think that's sort of the media saturation and the hype constant. This being the constant talking point, the vaccine. That's sort of been what people have kind of been led to believe, and then that's what's feeding, what we've been talking about, the increased consumer confidence or the increased business confidence, because whatever they might think or not think about the vaccine, they think, well, this is some point we get to when everything can go back to normal, as it were. But yeah, even with talking to people in my family, trying to have a reasoned discussion with my mother about, what is or isn't in the vaccine, or whether it is a good or bad idea or whatever. For her, it just comes down to, oh, I don't want to have to put one of those test things up my nose, and I just want to go off on holiday again and see the grandkids in Germany and Spain, and then this seems to be the thing that allows me to do it. So whenever this comes up in conversation, she never gives any health reasons for having this injection, which she's sort of had, and so it seems to be a similar kind of conversation with other people, particularly around that age. But yeah, as you say, people are just going a little bit stir crazy and just desperate to sort of get out there, and particularly now with spring, summer arising. I think, regardless of the vaccine, I think generally things, now that officially they said you can do certain things by this date and that date, people are now looking forward to spring, summer, and naturally somewhat more confident as a result. And then that leads to people spending more money, whether it's the business investing, spending, or people personally spending. So yeah, a lot of our clients have done very well over the last 12 months, and ourselves as a business too, even though, some setbacks and a couple of rough periods, particularly sort of March, April last year. But I think companies and businesses generally are in a better financial position than most people might otherwise think. Well, of course, there's been lots of horrible stories. You just have to look at the high street with all these shops boarded up.
Yeah.
I think people are sitting on a lot of money, and as soon as they think things, they can be confident, then people go out and start doing stuff with it, I think.
Yeah.
Businesses.
Yeah, there is I've talked about this on the podcast before in the past, with all those businesses that have closed and been forced to close. There's a difficult call to make as to whether or not that is because of COVID that it's caused it, or because it was just a badly run, overburdened with debt business in the first place. And it's just had that hit. So there was a report, 17,500 chain stores have closed in the last year, which sounds like a massive figure. But the point is, like, well, people weren't shopping there, and they weren't shopping there before lockdown anyway. And so, what lockdown has only kind of, consolidated those problems. But yeah, I think it does seem to me, I think you're right, Jonathan. There's a lot of people the sentiment seems to be, and I've spoken to people that I thought were, pretty on the side of kind of, no, I won't have a vaccine kind of side of people, verging towards, well, if it allowed me to go on holiday, then I'll take it. And that's where we're at. That's people where people's backbone is, and their stance. They're prepared to kind of flex where they're at to allow them to get back to normal life. But John, with that in mind, John, though, do you think that optimism and that boost of spending is only be a temporary thing, isn't it? April, June comes, the pubs are already fully booked at the minute, but it's just a temporary thing, because once we get back to normal, inverted commas, it's just back to normal spending, isn't it? Everyone goes, I better ease off the gas a bit. I can't spend like I did last month.
It's a discussion point that I've had with quite a lot of people, because I like having a bit of a natter with a few people from time to time, and I agree and disagree. I think that there are those people that are absolutely craving to get back to normal. What's that going to look like? What does normal look like now? Because you kind of you look at society, and you look at towns and cities now. They're going to be remarkably different. I mean, there's a report in I think in one of the local Leicester papers where I think the Debenhams part of the High Cross is going to be turned into 300 apartments.
Yeah.
So it's that's going to be uniquely different. And I think just looking at stuff like that, where you kind of look at town and city centres, I don't think they're going to be the go-to places, as they were once upon a time. I think that, if you're going to go out shopping, it will be more of a destination than it would be just to go and have a bit of a poddle about.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's a Ipswich town have come out with a plan. It's badly named. Did they call it the 15-minute town centre plan or something like that? And that to me means it looks like they're trying to get you to stay for at least 15 minutes before you realise it's bad. You need to turn around. But the whole idea behind it is they're going to reduce shops and make it more of a neighbourhood, which you kind of get, in London, the sort of the gentrification of some of the, the high streets in some of the districts in London. And it becomes a centre for people to go to, which is, there's some restaurants there, there's some places to enjoy, there's park space, and there might be a shop or two, but it isn't just about shopping, which is the high street has been over the last years. And those kind of changes, I think, probably positive, actually.
I'd agree.
Yeah.
I think that there has to be a bit of a cultural shift and a bit of a cultural change. It's it isn't all around economically. It's not all going to be driven down to the high street and what we spend in the high street or at the high street. It's where we go and spend it for our own leisure time, for our own personal well-being. Whatever that may well be. Whether it's to the cinema, whether it is to the pub, whether it's to a restaurant, whether it's to a bowling alley, whatever it may well be. I do think that there has to be a change. I don't think normal, in my humble opinion, I don't think normal will be as it was. No. I think there has to be a change.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there anything, any stories this week that caught your eye, caught your attention this week that you thought, that's interesting? I'd like to talk to Stephen about that.
Oof.
Don't worry if there's not, because I can edit this bit out. I mean, if you just keep the silence going, that would be even better.
Yesterday, what was it? The passing the bill in Parliament about the removing effectively the right to protest. Sort of things like that seem to be gathering pace, as it were.
Gathering speed, isn't it? It's like, from I think it's in one of the coronavirus acts, isn't it? You're not allowed to gather to protest, and that's a temporary measure for COVID because of COVID things, and then they go, wow, it kind of worked, so let's roll it out and make it permanent.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see how it's been worded. Basically just causing a nuisance, however that might be interpreted, can potentially get you a 10-year jail sentence or something.
I'm never going out again.
Honestly,
word nuisance is. Oh, John's left the front door.
Yeah. Honestly.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Well, a couple of weekends ago, I was going for a jog in the local park. Yeah, nice morning, and there's a few people outside the cafe in the park. There's sort of an orderly queue with people and their families, groups getting a coffee, and then there's a bunch of people who are kind of like trying to, knew that they weren't of the same family group kind of thing, but their kids were meeting up in the playground, and they were sort of trying to, awkward thing. Well, we better sort of keep socially distanced, all the rest of it. Don't want to cause any issue, and then literally within 5 minutes of this sort of group kind of like semi-forming and talking, somebody phoned the police. All these coppers with their little plastic gloves on and masks suddenly sort of ran round the corner, and there was an altercation from like nothing, and then it suddenly escalated, and then I sort of left at the beginning of it, but then there was like a sort of an altercation, effectively an assault on this the chap and his son, teenage son, late teens, who ended up going back to a cell somewhere for a few hours. Although I was told that they were walking away from the police, but then the sort of police jumped on them. So they were sort of slightly talking back, but I don't think they were doing anything wrong in that respect. But and then I saw a video later on. There was like about literally 20 police cars, all these police officers, a whole load of them, sitting on top of this chap who'd been effectively arrested for being in the park with his son with a coffee. Anyway, the whole situation, the more I looked at it, thinking, oh my God, this is ridiculous. What
extreme, isn't it?
What the police up to, and they seem to be loving it. But yeah, this is increasing. You hear stories like that all around the country, and increasingly, and weird, bizarre tweets from police officers saying, "Oh yeah, we've caught some young chaps playing football in the park." You thought that they'd be slightly awkward or ashamed, but it's becoming like increasingly politically correct, as it were, or something that is acceptable for the police to do. Well, they think so anyway.
I mean, with that, I suppose in a way, it's, the parameters of what you're told to, as a police officer, you go, well, those are the rules.
Yeah.
I do think that sometimes it must be incredibly hard, especially when you're in the middle of a pandemic, of this caliber, where you kind of go, normally I'd use my common sense, but
and I think that's the problem, though, isn't it? I think it's the fact that there's been a direction from above. Yeah. That this is where you've got to focus your efforts right now. Yeah. Like there's no other crimes happening or nothing else to do.
Exactly.
It's let's stop a mum and a mum and a separated son or something like that from having a drink in the park.
What Jonathan just said there is, you imagine, as a father and a teenage son going to the park to go for a coffee on a Sunday. Well, you never dreamt in any world that you'd end up in a police cell. That's just mad. I mean, it's like when I actually drove the car the other day for the first time in 2 weeks. That was interesting. There was the police mobile road thing, and I was like, they've got nothing better to do. Surely there's got to be something better to do than have a couple of police officers sat in the back of a van with just watching cars go by and making sure that they do 40 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's all it's all nonsense. I think the point is there's always historically, and this is my with my conspiracy hat on, there's always things that happen throughout history, throughout the last 100 years, where there's been a major event and then liberty has changed, and people's liberties drop down and the rights that they have get loosened or get tightened, I should say. And this is one of them. And so this is kind of what to be expected from now on, because my personal belief is that we won't go back to normal in inverted commas. We'll have this for foreseeable future, and the whole social distancing, whole masks, and all that kind of thing is something that we'll just have.
It'll never go away, will it? Because at the end of the day, COVID's there with us for the rest of our lives, regardless of whether we get the jabs. It'll be flu. The same thing as flu, but which we've had it, but now the change is, like with flu, like they recommended you have a jab, and most people didn't have it, only the people that were vulnerable, and life went on. And now we've adapted as a country, as a nation, as a globe, to go, well, okay, let's have some restrictions, makes sense. So we'll go in every year for the last 10 years. There's been a flu outbreak.
But now we will have a flu outbreak, a coronavirus outbreak with restrictions attached to it.
I mean, with this sort of going back to normal sort of situation, do you see work going back to normal, where there'll be lots of networking, lots of events, lots of meetings face to face, or do you think that there will be a lot more of a tie-in to, lots more Zooming, lots more MS Teams and the like?
I think it will. It goes into there's a few different categories of people, I think. So one category of people, the people that like just want to get back going out, doing what they want to do, don't want to have restrictions, and they're probably, they're not wearing a mask already, and if they, unless they get told off, and so they will be back as soon as they can, face to face, and that kind of thing. There's another set of people that are perhaps a bit more reserved than that, and will go, okay, well, let's see how it goes. Is it going to be safe when I get there? I don't want to be, in a room of 50 people, all mingling together. Like, is there going to be some, some safety there, and that kind of be a bit more comfortable with that? But I will go, but I, just want to be made comfortable about it. And then there'll be people that will go, oh no, I'm too scared. I don't want to do that. I'd stay at home. I'm happy to go at home. We were doing okay on Zoom. Let's just do it on Zoom. That's fine. I don't need to meet you face to face. We can do it like that. And I think there'll be three types of people, and that's all right. That's okay. Everyone's different. You do what you want to do, how you want to do it. I think that's my view.
Do you see that having an impact on business?
No, it hasn't.
Negatively, positively.
Hasn't in the last year, and I think that's the thing. So it depends on the business. It depends on what area and sector you're in. Of course, if you're in hospitality, you've had a pretty bad year. But I've got clients, and I'm sure Jonathan has, that one client said to me they've not had as much money in the bank ever because of how the business has worked. It's successful. They've been able to, early doors, they were getting some furlough money in to cover some of the wages. And they've had some grants in because of this, that, and the other, and and then the business is doing okay. It's there's a lot of businesses that are doing all right, doing well. And there's some that aren't, and there's some people that aren't, and some families, like you say, there's you're respectful in that some households and some businesses haven't done very well. So it's not sitting from the top of the chain, looking down and laughing at everybody. You've got to understand and appreciate that some people have had tough times, but those ones that have done all right, well, I don't think it will, going back into any kind of normality, even if there's a few different groups of people, I don't think it will affect things, because there'll be some people that will want to meet face to face, and there's some people that won't. Well, we can do both now. That's it, Jonathan. I mean, your business, Jonathan, would have changed and adapted, I guess, because of some of the restrictions, but I think you've kind of kept your office open throughout, haven't you?
Yeah,
or at least to some extent.
A few people, yeah. So, I think there was always sort of a couple of us in the office right from sort of March, April last year, and we judged that we needed to do that, and we didn't quite know whether that would be okay. So we wrote like a formal letter in case the health inspectors came round, or the police, or what have you, sort of outlining the reasons why we needed to do this and why it was okay and all the rest of it. Because one of our consultant solicitors does wills and probate, we need to be in the office to do all the post and send that on and all the rest of it and other things. And so it was a bit of a weird time when Hayward Heath, where I work and live, was like a complete ghost town, like cycling through town, didn't see anyone at all. But then, I think most people came back to the office fairly or sooner than other companies, when, and particularly that we've got quite a few juniors in the office. So it worked okay, but it was harder to work remotely, and it's easier when we're in the office and can more easily discuss and check things and all the rest of it. When there was an announcement made in January, we just decided to keep, well, most of us anyway, some didn't, but to continue working from the office. And that, our interpretation of the Section 6 of the Health Protections Coronavirus Restrictions Regulations, the relevant statutory instrument, was that where it says, permitted to leave where you're living to travel for purposes where it is not reasonably possible for that person to work or provide their services from where they are living. So we just like a lot of other people in the service office block, we just continued to work from the office. But there's some people who continue to work from home, which I think to a certain extent is because that's where you get used to working. And so people just continued to do that until things change. But yeah, it's benefited our business, I think, being under back within that open plan office, albeit we still work remotely with people anyway. So we want to continue doing that. Plus, we want to move into a bigger office soon. So that gives a bit more space for everyone, which is good. But hopefully, there's going to be no issue doing that, because we kind of need to do that to grow our business, really.
Decent plug, Jonathan, that is, to anybody that is going to listen to Stephen's podcast who has a larger office space. Get in touch with Jonathan Lee.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of we're sort of deciding on a space, but yeah, I think if we need to work from home again, and then that was okay. But yeah, I much prefer, it does work much better when the central team anyway are in the office. And
I think that's the thing exactly, is that and I've talked on previous podcasts about working from home, and there's been a lot in the press about various different companies wanting people in the office, not wanting people in the office, and that kind of thing. And I think where we're reaching is that people are different and people work differently. And so some people will want to, work from home more than being in the office. Some people want to be in the office all the time. Some companies will want their people in the office all the time because of the makeup of the people. And some companies might go, well, none of our people need to be in the office, so they can work from home. So that will all just it will just even itself out across the board. I know I'm acting for a landlord on a dilapidations claim. Someone's left, and this company had 3 floors in an office, 20,000 square foot, and now they want like a quarter of one floor, and it's like that shift in the course of a year is actually quite amazing. And from the landlord's point of view, obviously he's left with, well, what do I do with my building now? Looking at making it maybe serviced office type thing, and renting out smaller spaces for people that are home working but want somewhere to go and not sit on the lounge. But it demonstrates, and equally you have a company like Jonathan's that's going, we're growing, we're doing all right, so we want to grow and we want to get that. So
I think we hired quite a few juniors towards the end of last year, and we wouldn't have been able to do that if we're in the office, as it were. Yeah. So and we did have one person sadly leave. Paralegal left. Resigned a few weeks ago because we asked him, we couldn't work with him when he was in his bedroom, so we asked him nicely if he could come back in the office for a couple of days a week, and he handed in his notice. But yeah, as you say, people deal with this situation differently, and some people are happy to regardless of what the government says, to go along and try and do things as normal. Other people are very, I might say, possessed with irrational fear and seeing this as something that's good to demonstrate, and even though it's harmful to them. But I don't know. Yeah, we're just going to try and do things as normal. So already today, talking about what events to do in the spring, summer, and hopefully do another summer party, and try and have those things to look forward to. Hopefully they can go ahead, because otherwise, I think saying that, because this has gone on so long now, there is this sort of almost like this culturally institutionalized view where that sort of having meetings in person is not dangerous, but just isn't kind of like acceptable, or then people are unsure whether they should do it because some people might disagree or might not want to go along, or whatever it might be. But hopefully things will start to sort of open up a bit now in spring, summer. I think you've all had enough of Zoom's been great for us. I think that works really well, particularly like converting leads as the law firm and not having to have that in-person meeting. But then at the same time, doing these networking events, I think most people are like, oh God, we've had enough of these Zoom networking events, albeit, they have worked well to a degree. I'm just quite looking forward to having a drink with someone in person.
Yeah, definitely. Gents, I've kept you long enough. So thank you very much for coming on this week's podcast. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
No problem, yeah.
And
nice to speak to you, chaps.
Yeah, excellent. And to everybody listening at home, thank you very much for listening. If you've not subscribed to the podcast, do subscribe, leave a review, and let us know your thoughts on social media. We're at the Business Herald. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. But until next week, thank you very much, and see you again. Goodbye.
Cheers,
guys. That's it. Thanks very much. I'll end.